We are meeting here today on the joint press conference on the impact of the national. I think I'll hold it, okay? This is on the joint press conference on the impact of the national minimum wage. We like to stress right at the beginning that we are working together as a collective group of associations. We are not, I would like to emphasize, we are not against any policy that the government is talking about in terms of minimum wage. Let me repeat, we are not against the policy of minimum wage. We are only concerned about the effects of the implementation. The effects of the implementation, we believe, can have an adverse effect on the industries, whether it's industry in one sector or in another. And therefore, because of that, we feel that it's good for us and important for us, and most important is that it's necessary for us to share our views on the implications. Now, we like to also stress one very important thing is that if we implement a minimum wage that has an adverse effect on the economy, remember, we cannot backtrack. That means that if you give a person an increase, and the increase is something that they enjoy for 3 months or 1 year, and you find that the effect is going to be negative, you cannot backtrack. You cannot ask a person to pay back, or you cannot ask the person to get a discount in salary. So it's very important that as we go along this process of looking at minimum wage, the effect must be considered. And if the effect is indeed going to be very bad and going to be very substantial, then we should have to sit back and understand that there is a need for us to look at the process of the implementation and the effects of the implementation. Now, the proposal that we have is that, once again, we are not against any minimum wage. But we believe that it's very important that the minimum wage must be matched by productivity gains. What do we mean by productivity gains? Now, let me give you a very simple example. If you have a company, ABC company, and the company has got a salary bill of 100 ringgit today. So you have a salary bill of 100 ringgit today, and you make 100 units of a product, any product it can be, okay? So what it means is that you have a cost of 100 ringgit in salary, and you have 100 units that you produce. So this unit, this product, let's say this is a pen. I make 100 units of pen from a salary cost of 100 ringgit. So it means that this pen will now cost, in terms of labor cost, $1, 1 ringgit per pen. Okay. Now, if there is an increase in the minimum wage by 20%, so my company's cost will now go up from 100 ringgit in salary to 120 ringgit in salary. But in terms of cost, I still make 100 units of pen only. So my salary cost now has gone from 100 to 120, but the number of units that I make is still 100. So it means that the cost of per pen now has gone up from 1 ringgit per pen to 1 ringgit and 20 cents per pen. But from the employee point of view, they are happy because they get 20% increase in salary. That is an increase, so they are happy. But the realistic part of business is that when you have an increase in cost, it does not necessarily mean that you can actually sell, you can make the product, but it does not necessarily mean that you can sell the product, because the product now goes up by 20 cents or 20%. Now, what is the effect if you cannot sell the product? When you cannot sell the product, it means that you don't have an income. If you don't have an income, it means that you don't have the cash to pay your workers the salary that they have received in terms of increase. Now, when the company goes on for 6 months or 1 year without the ability to make a product and sell the product, eventually the ultimate situation would be that the company will have to close shop. Now, when a company closes shop, because there is an increase in cost that is not matched by a productivity gain, the company has no choice but to just eventually close shop. What will then happen is that this company will have all the staff being retrenched, or they have to move on. And the sad irony is that, let's go back to the first instance. When the staff, when the minimum wage is being introduced, the intention is to benefit the staff. And it does, if it does at the immediate spot, this person will enjoy an increase in salary. But like what I say, that if there is no matching productivity gain, then they will not have a job at all. So what we will see is, in an earlier slide I did mention about the short-term effect and the long-term risk. The short-term immediate effect is that this person will get an increase in salary. He will be happy for a while. But the irony is that while the intention is good to give him an increase in salary, but what is the effect if he eventually loses his job? Okay, so what we are saying now is that when you have an increase in cost, it must be matched by a productivity gain. What do we mean by productivity gain? Now, the example that I've shown, the cost of salary goes up from 100 ringgit to 120 ringgit. But the number of units that are being produced is still 100 units. So if you take 120 ringgit divided by 100 unit of pen, your cost per pen is 1 ringgit and 20 cents. So let's say that when you increase from 100 pen to 110 pen, and eventually to 120 pen. So now when you reach 120 pens, you will now have a situation where your salary cost is 120, and your number of pens that you produce is also 120. Which means that if you take 120 ringgit in salary divided by 120 units in pen, the cost per pen of labor is 1 ringgit. So this is the productivity gain that we are talking about. That means that the company must be able to increase the number of units that they produce in terms of productivity to match the increase in the cost of salary. In order for us to get the productivity gain, it is not something that you can do it overnight. You have to train the people, you have to improve the efficiency, and because of that, you have to change the operating conditions. The operating conditions have to be changed, the training of the low-skilled workers has to be enhanced, and all this takes time. And because it takes time, you will actually need to have to see that any proposal that we have must be productivity linked and must be given sufficient time for it to work. It must be staggered over a period of time. Then the next bullet point, when we talk about sector and industry specific, is that remember that not all industry can afford the same amount of cost. In some industries that say making anything, it could be making plastics, it could be making shoes, it could be making furniture, there is no restriction in entry in terms of licenses and so on. So what it means is that because of the differential in competitive situations and licenses and requirements, different sectors have different affordability. So in this regard, minimum wage must also take in consideration different sectors, and it must be therefore sector and industry specific. When we look at cost, what you see as cost in Perlis, Kedah, Kelantan will be very different from what you see in Penang, Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, and Johor. So in this regard, when we come out with a minimum salary thing, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all across-board thing adjustment. It must be also geographical location specific. Okay? So because of that, these are the key points that we will touch on as our proposal. On the effect of employment, if there is a sudden and substantial increase. Now there are two keywords here that I want to touch on. It must be sudden and it must be substantial. When you have a sudden and substantial increase, the effect is there will be a difficulty for the company to absorb the cost based on the example that I showed you just now on the economies of scale of making a pen. If the company is not able to absorb the cost, then the example that we have just shown just now would be that there will be an increase in cost where the company will not be able to absorb it. One of the questions that somebody told me is that, oh, it is okay, because what happens is that, let's say that if I am an employee of a company and I get a 20%, just an example, a 20% increase in salary. And then later on, because my company makes a product and the cost of the product goes up by 20%, I am okay. Why? Because I also receive an increase in salary. So since there's an increase in my salary and there's an increase in cost, so mash lah, ngam, okay? That sounds a very simplistic situation. You're only looking at one side of the equation. Why do I mean by one side of the equation is that Malaysia is an export-driven country. Malaysia makes a lot of things, but we have to export simply because the population of Malaysia is about 29 million. So which means is that if you were to make the product and sell it in Malaysia only, the Malaysian market is not big enough. And if you look at the statistics of the country, you will find that many of the industries who are seated here are very export-driven. Just to give you an example, the plastic industry exported 62% of what we produced last year in 2011. Okay? Let's use a round figure of 60%. So what it means is that 40% is produced and sold locally, 60% is exported. Now, when we give the example of saying that if there is an increase in cost, but the employee has an equivalent increase in salary, and he is therefore able to absorb and afford the cost increase, it sounds okay, there's no problem. So we can move on. But what happens to balance 60% of the exports? The balance 60% of the exports, this cost of the exports goes up now. So when I go to a country, let's say that we go to Europe and say that we're going to sell this product, and we used to sell at say 1 ringgit of labor cost those days, now I have to sell them at 120 and tell them, hey, this increase is 120 now, that's because of minimum wage. So please absorb it. Unfortunately, in life, it is not so simple because they will now look at it and say that, okay, you have got an increase in cost, but why should I absorb your cost because of your country's minimum policy, minimum wage policy? So this country, this importer would therefore look at it objectively and say that, let me compare the same product that is going to be imported by them from another country. And obviously, when they compare the cost, they will then buy from another country. They will not buy from us. So when that happens, we will end up with a situation where for every 100% of the products that we make, only 40% will be sold to the local market. The balance 60% cannot be sold and exported. Now, when that happens, then this company can only sell 40%. But remember, the total wage bill, the salary bill of the company remains unchanged, because salary is what we call a fixed cost. Whether you make a product and sell a product, or you don't make a product and sell a product, your wage remains unchanged. It's a fixed cost. So now you're taking your total bill, total salary bill divided by only 40%. Therefore, your unit cost goes up. And when that happens, your cost will become so high that even the 40% cannot be sold. So that is another way of saying that at the end of the day, the increase will in fact adversely affect a company to such an extent that they will first lose off the export sale, and then secondly, they will have problems with local sales, and eventually they will just close shop. And that's the end of it. So that is what we're going to say. And also bear in mind is that this implication of the economy is that without the ability for Malaysia to export, you will then find that Malaysia would have a problem when it comes to foreign exchange earnings. We need that. So that is the implication, apart from the effect of the company losing, closing shop, about the employee losing the job, there is also an impact on the economy of the country insofar as foreign exchange is concerned. When I make this statement about closing shop and so on, quite usually some people will say, yeah, it's just a statement, but how far is true? Now this one is a job loss that we have just projected for the plastic industry. It is just a projection on the basis of if this increased by a certain amount, we would have a 20% increase in 20% fallout, meaning that there would be a situation where people will lose the job. And you can see from here that if even 20% of the people close shop, the companies close shop, you're talking about 20,000 people losing their job, because we have 86,000 workers in the in this industry. Now, let me clarify that I've used the plastic industry as an example so that we happen to have the figures, that is easy for me to work on it. Seated with me at this head table, there are many other companies that would face similar problem. Each of them would have a problem in terms of closing shop, and therefore the number of employees losing their jobs, okay? But again, like what I've stated, this is a statement. Can I back it up with figures? Now, photographers always say that A picture tells 1,000 words, but from the accounting point of view, a figure also tells 1,000 words. So you can see from here that we have taken 8 listed companies. Now I would like to emphasize these are 8 listed companies that are involved in the plastic industry. Why I'm emphasizing 8 listed companies is that you will see from here that the first 3 companies, PLC1, PLC stands for Public Listed Company 1, 2, and 3, they actually have a profit. The profit range from 6% down to about just 4% for an average of 5%. Then you see from PLC 4 to PLC 8, the majority of them, out of the 8 of them, 5 of them actually loses money. Now, what I'm trying to show from here is that even a listed companies are larger. Because of being listed, they are a larger company, they have a better system and so on, and yet they suffer from losses. Why they suffer from losses is that the operating conditions that Malaysia is facing and everyone else is facing in the economic cycle is not so easy. The recovery has not fully come up, and therefore things are difficult. The timing of any increase in cost would therefore be very bad. But this example is to show you 2 things. Number 1, a listed company has got problems, and even a listed company can suffer losses. Number 2, if you look at the whole thing, you have 2 groups of companies, those that are profitable and those that are not profitable. Those that are not profitable means that they are already having problem with cost. Any increase in cost means that you're putting the final nail into the coffin, so to say, okay? But those who are making profit, let's look at those who are making profit. Those who are making profit are having an average profit of about 5%. The current minimum wage that we have here on average is 650 ringgit. Now, let me emphasize many times that this is a basic salary. This 650 ringgit is basic salary. It excludes what we call other salary related expenses like incentives, like allowances, like bonuses, like overtime, and including EPF. This is actually what you would call a total wage bill. And that would what most people consider to be take-home pay, okay, excluding the EPF. But we will use the basic figure of 650 because if I add in all the other costs, you might get confused with the comparison of the 800 figure to 1,000 figure that the government is talking about as far as basic pay is concerned. So we are comparing basic pay to basic pay. But bear in mind that it is not 650 that the workers get when they take home to their house. It is actually more than 650. A typical worker who gets 650 in salary as basic, typically after they take in consideration overtime, bonuses, incentives, and allowances and so on, typically they take home more than 1,000 ringgit, okay? So please, the perception when you see this graph sometimes is that, wow, this guy only 650, how to survive? Not true. They actually get more than 650 in terms of take-home pay. Now let's go into dissecting what is on the graph. What is on the graph? If we take the base figure of 15%, remember the earlier pie chart. The earlier pie chart shows that profit margin in a typical company that is profitable is 5%, when labor cost is 15%. So this is the base figure where we are now, where based on this 650, salary bill is 15% of total, okay? Now, if we increase from 650 to 800, the total cost will now go up to 17.8%. So which means that between 17.8 to 15%, you're looking at 2.8% increase. Earlier on, remember that you only have 5%. When you take that out, you're left very, very little. If you increase to 900, your nose is just above water. If you go above to 1,000, it is goodbye and that's it. But bear in mind, this is for companies that are already profitable and having 5% margin. There are many companies that are below 5% margin. There are also many companies that are already suffering from a loss. So we are looking at a good scenario, best case scenario situation. it is a multiply effect. When you pay 650 to 800 ringgit, it is not just a simple figure of saying 800 minus 650, the increase is 150 ringgit. No. Why? Because you and I know that EPF is calculated on a function of your salary. Okay? So earlier on, your cost is 15%, 13% EPF contribution on 650. Now it is 13% on 800. You add this on to the increase. Overtime is based on your base salary. Now instead of calculated on a 650 base, you're calculating on 800 base. So that is an incremental effect. It's what we call a multiply effect. Bonuses as well, allowances as well. So that effect is not just saying that when we increase from 800 to from 650 to 800, the increase is only 150. It is much more than that. Okay, this is what we call the multiply effect. The other point that we want to stress on is what is the definition of minimum wage? To us, the 650 that we are paying, we call it basic. We call it basic salary. Okay, basic salary excludes incentives, bonuses, EPF, and so on. So the take-home pay is much higher than the basic salary. At this point in time, we have not been given a definition of what is minimum wage. Does minimum wage means basic salary, which means that if it's 800, minimum wage means it's 800 basic salary, or does it include already incentive and bonuses? If anything, we should be not talking about basic salary or minimum wage. We should be talking about what is the take-home pay that a worker is already currently getting. And right now, I can assure you that most of the workers are already getting more than 800. That is a fact on the take-home pay basis, okay? The other thing that we also want to talk about is that very often people say, oh, you know, this is only going to maybe affect 30% of the workers. It doesn't affect the rest of the people who are already earning more than, say, 900 ringgit of basic pay. If the minimum wage is, say, set at 900, so anyone that's already earning more than 900, you don't have to adjust. You only adjust a small group of people, maybe 30% of them, from 650 to 900. So your cost doesn't increase across board. Reality. If your staff gets an increment because of the adjustment, in your office, do you think you want an increment as well? Obviously, very obviously. So what will happen is that this will be a wage adjustment that goes across board. It is not one worker, it's not two workers, it's not one category of worker. It goes to all category of workers, which means that this will not be confined, excuse me, this will not be confined to only certain group of people. It will have what we call a ripple effect throughout the entire organization. What is the knock-on effect? Now, the knock-on effect is very simple. If you look at many things that you and I are using, I'm sure in your pocket you would have at least one handphone. And for many of the reporters here, I'm sure you will have in your pocket or these are at least 1 or 2 thumb drives. Okay? In your hand, you're writing a pen. You're using a pen, okay? After this, I need a drink of water. I got to look for a bottle of mineral water. Now, what are all these things? What are these things? These things at the end of the day, you look at this product, you call this product, well, this is a controller, okay? But if you look at it at the end of the day, this is plastics. So what we are saying is that many products are actually supporting industry to another industry. For instance, for those who are making furniture, they do not make the furniture out of the thin air. They need to get a lot of raw material supply, adhesive, fabric, and so on. They need a lorry to carry the goods from raw material to finished goods and so on. So what it means now is that when one company has got a problem, it will have a ripple effect throughout other subsectors. So for instance, let's say that Malaysia is a very big player when it comes to the E&E sector, electrical and electronics sector, okay? You will find that he is the head of the association for team. It's a very nice word. We are all together as a team here, TEM. But then, if the plastic industry cannot make a plastic component that is necessary that to be used in the assembly of a plastic product, you're not going to get a TV. Okay? If the plastic industry collapses, you're not going to get a car because the bumper of a car is plastics. If you go out and you need a drink of water, you cannot find water without a mineral water bottle. Okay? So this is the effect. It will have a multiply effect throughout the chain. It will have an effect on retailers. It will have an effect on manufacturing. It is going to have an effect on FDI. This was the document that was released by MITI very recently. It is dated 21st of February, just very recently. They were talking about the amount of FDIs the government have been able to get from various countries. And the numbers are interesting, the numbers are compelling, impressive, but let's look at why people come and invest in Malaysia. When we invest in another country, there are two reasons why you invest in that country. Number one is that it could be because the country has got a lot of internal market that we invest in. Number two is because if we go to a country, maybe the cost of production there is lower. That's why we go to the country to invest in the country. Now, let's look at Malaysia and China. People go to China, invest in China. Why? Because the market there is so big that people will go there and make a product and sell in the local market. But again, remember I said earlier on that the population in Malaysia is small. It's only 29 million. There is not much that will attract a foreign investor to come to Malaysia to make a product for the purpose of selling the product in Malaysia. That is reality. So, the only other reason they would come to Malaysia to make a product in Malaysia is because the cost of making a product in Malaysia is competitive relative to another country. So they come to Malaysia, they make the product in Malaysia, and then they can use that as an export base to export overseas. Now, when this cost goes up, the FDIs will also dry up. And the FDI is a very important component in driving the economy, because FDI means that new ventures, new manufacturing companies, new businesses are set up here. This create jobs, this create demand, this create a supply situation that our people benefit. If you take away the FDI, you would have an adverse situation here. Okay? So, to show you what is the effect, you will find, for instance, in this example, just using again the plastic industry as an example, you will find that 42% of the products that are made in plastics serve the packaging industry. If the plastic industry collapses, you are not going to get your food packed because nobody is going to give you anything to pack the food that brings to your house. Okay? The E&E industry accounts for 25%. It's a very strong component of the industry. Household, automotive. So you can see from here that this is what we call the multiplier effect on the entire supply chain. Okay? There is therefore an economic effect on an increase, a sudden and substantial increase in the minimum wage. When that cost goes up, we may face problems in maintaining the competitiveness in exports. We need to therefore match this with a corresponding and equivalent increase in productivity. We need to create a higher skill of workers, and skilled workers takes time to be created. And because of that, we need to have time. There is a need for an implementation process. It must be in phases where the cost can be absorbed by a link to productivity. Minimum wage, in our sincere and honest opinion, is something that in the terms of the authorities, we believe is a good thing. We believe it is good for us to eventually move the population to a high income. But while we are supportive of the proposal and the implement of the proposal, we are very concerned, let me repeat, about the implementation process. The implementation process is something which we believe, based on the example I've shown, would cause severe and adverse reaction to the industries. And like what I've stated earlier on is that it is something that is so severe that if we jump into making a proposal and 1 year later we find it is a mistake, bear in mind that you cannot give an increment to a worker and say that now we realize the productivity is affected, the country is in problem, we are going to backtrack and withdraw that. I think there will be chaos. And because of that, we should not be hasty in jumping and plucking a figure and saying that without taking into consideration the implications along the chain of what is cost and what is needed to make sure that a company continues to survive in order to provide a job to the staff, who is supposed to be the beneficiary of this increase in minimum wage. Okay? So in conclusion, first of all, there must be an increase in productivity to maintain competitiveness. So what it means is that minimum wage must be productivity linked. It cannot stand on its own in isolation. It must be productivity linked. Number two, because productivity takes time to get into effect and to be effective, there is a need for us not to have a sudden and a substantial increase. Instead, this should be staggered and implemented over a period of time so that time is given and available for companies to change the way they do, to implement efficiency measures, to therefore then bring in the productivity to link it to the increase in cost. It must be staggered, okay? That is giving business and time to improve productivity. There must be training so that staff will acquire new skills and improve the knowledge and take us to the next level. All these must be available to accommodate operating conditions and any other factors, including inflation. Inflation is something that can drag a country down. And inflation is something that China is very, very worried about. When we have a sudden increase in salary for a worker, you will now suddenly, on a very short-term basis, end up with a situation where people will have a lot of disposable income in their pocket. When they have a lot of disposable income in the pocket, there is what you call an increase in propensity to spend. People will spend more very suddenly on a short-term basis. When that happens, very usually it leads to inflation. Okay, so that is a concern that we have. And also, as I mentioned earlier on, any increase, while it must be productivity linked, it must also be linked to sectors. Different industries are operating under different conditions. We like to appeal to the government that any increase should be sectorial related. You cannot go and take a figure and say that for the media industry is so much, for the plastic industry is so much, for the furniture industry is so much, and for the SME industry is so much, same, super, all the same. You will have a problem over there. Finally, on the final one would be, it must be also the geography of the place. The location must be also considered. So basically, it cannot have a cross-port figure, Peninsular Malaysia, from up north in Kedah Police all the way down to Johor, same. I think that will create a situation where many companies will close down. Okay, so these are the things that I would like to emphasize from the presentation. In conclusion, again, I just want to make very clear before anyone conclude that we are against the government policy. No. I like to repeat, and I like to continue to repeat, we are supportive of the proposal. We are only concerned about the implementation process.